Ghostly whispers echo through crumbling chapels, unseen hands brush your skin in the dark, and curses cling to ancient stones. The UK hides terrifying places where the dead don't rest, they linger. Tonight, we uncover 10 real haunted chapels with stories so chilling, you'll sleep with the lights on. From demonic nuns to headless vicars, these are not just legends, they're real encounters that still haunt those who dare to visit. If you think you're brave enough, press play. But be warned, some ghosts are listening. 1. The Demon Nun of Borley Chapel. The Borley Chapel in Essex is often called the most haunted place in England, with its most infamous ghost being the Demon Nun. The story begins in the 1800s when Borley Rectory was built near an old chapel. Locals whispered that a Benedictine monastery once stood there, and a monk fell in love with a nun. When their secret affair was discovered, the monk was executed, and the nun was bricked alive inside the walls. A cruel punishment that left her spirit trapped. Over the years, people reported seeing a pale, sorrowful nun drifting near the chapel, her face hidden beneath a black veil. But this wasn't just a sad ghost, something far darker lurked there. In the 1920s, the rectory became known for violent poltergeist activity. Objects flew across rooms, unseen hands scratched walls, and deep, guttural growls echoed in empty halls. The most terrifying accounts came from visitors who saw the nun's ghost transform, her hollow eyes turning black, her gentle figure twisting into something monstrous. Some claimed she whispered curses, others said she attacked them in the dark. One night, a group of investigators witnessed a phantom coach, pulled by ghostly horses, racing toward the chapel before vanishing into thin air. The air would turn icy, and people felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if something evil was watching them. The most chilling incident happened when a psychic medium visited the site. She claimed the nun wasn't just a lost soul, she was a demon pretending to be a ghost, feeding on fear. Soon after, the rectory mysteriously burned down, but the hauntings didn't stop. Even today, visitors to the ruined chapel report hearing ghostly sobs, seeing shadowy figures, and feeling sudden, unnatural cold. Some have captured strange mists in photos, while others swear they've been pushed by invisible hands. The Demon Nun of Borley remains one of England's most feared spirits, a restless, angry presence tied to the land by tragedy and bloodshed. Whether she's a tormented soul or something more sinister, one thing is certain, the chapel's dark past still lingers, and those who dare to visit may regret it. 2. The Grey Lady of Woodchester Mansion Chapel. The Grey Lady of Woodchester Mansion Chapel is one of the most enduring and eerie ghost stories in Gloucestershire. The mansion itself is a sprawling, unfinished Gothic revival building, abandoned mid-construction in the 1800s, and its empty halls and crumbling chapel are said to be home to a sorrowful spirit. Witnesses describe her as a tall, slender woman dressed in grey, her face pale and filled with sadness. She appears most often near the chapel, drifting silently before vanishing into the shadows. But her presence is far from peaceful, those who encounter her speak of a sudden, bone-deep cold, a feeling of despair so heavy it's hard to breathe. No one knows for sure who she was in life, but local legends suggest she was a servant or perhaps a lady of the house who died tragically. Some say she took her own life in the chapel, others believe she was murdered and her body hidden within the mansion's walls. Whatever the truth, her ghost has been seen for generations. Workers restoring the mansion in the 20th century refused to stay overnight after hearing ghostly footsteps and disembodied whispers. One builder even claimed he saw the Grey Lady standing at the top of a staircase, only for her to dissolve into mist before his eyes. Paranormal investigators who have spent nights in the chapel report strange knocking sounds, sudden drops in temperature, and the overwhelming feeling of being watched. The most chilling encounter happened to a group of researchers who set up cameras in the chapel. As they reviewed footage the next day, they saw a shadowy figure move across the room, though no one had been there at the time. Later, one investigator felt an icy hand grip her shoulder, but when she turned, no one was there. Others have heard a woman sobbing in the dead of night, the sound echoing through the empty halls before fading into silence. The Grey Lady doesn't seem violent, but her presence leaves people shaken, as if they've glimpsed something beyond the world of the living. Even today, visitors to Woodchester Mansion tell stories of doors slamming on their own, ghostly figures in the chapel windows, and an unnatural stillness that makes the air feel heavy. Whether she's a lost soul searching for peace or a remnant of a forgotten tragedy, the Grey Lady's ghost ensures that Woodchester's halls will never truly be empty. 3. The Crying Boy of St. Mary's Chapel. The ghostly sobs of a child echo through the ancient stone walls of St. Mary's Chapel in York, a sound so heartbreaking that even the bravest visitors feel a chill crawl down their spines. The crying boy is said to be the spirit of a young orphan who died tragically in the 1800s, though no records of his death remain. Some say he perished in a fire that once ravaged the chapel's grounds, while others whisper he was abandoned there by cruel caretakers and left to starve. Whatever the truth, his presence lingers, a small, shadowy figure seen crouching in corners, his face buried in his hands as muffled cries fill the air. Those who listen closely claim to hear faint, whispered pleas for help, as if the boy is still waiting for someone to save him. Visitors who enter the chapel after dusk tell of sudden cold spots that follow them like an unseen breath, and some have felt tiny, icy fingers brush against theirs when no one is there. Paranormal investigators have captured eerie EVP recordings, a child's voice, clear and desperate, asking, "Why won't they come back?" Others have photographed strange, misty shapes near the chapel's crumbling pews, some resembling the outline of a small boy. The most unsettling encounters happen near the old baptismal font, where witnesses report seeing wet footprints appear on the stone floor, as if a dripping wet child has just passed by. One particularly haunting story involves a local historian who spent the night inside the chapel, determined to uncover the truth. Around midnight, he heard the unmistakable sound of a child crying just inches behind him. But when he turned, the room was empty. Moments later, his flashlight flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. As he fumbled for his spare light, he felt something tug at his coat sleeve, and a small, choked voice whispered, "Don't leave me." He fled the chapel and never returned after dark. To this day, people leave small toys or coins near the font, hoping to comfort the lost little soul. But the crying never stops, a reminder that some ghosts are too young to understand why they're still here, and too lonely to ever rest in peace. For the Black Monk of Pontifrack Chapel. The Black Monk of Pontifrack Chapel is one of Britain's most feared and violent ghosts, a shadowy figure with a reputation for terrorizing anyone who dares to enter his domain. The haunting centers around an old house near the chapel, where a medieval monk was said to have been hanged for unspeakable crimes. Some say witchcraft, others whisper of darker rituals. His spirit never left, and over the centuries, countless people have encountered him, always describing the same thing, a towering figure in tattered black robes, his face hidden in darkness, radiating pure malice. The air turns thick and sour when he appears, and those who've seen him up close speak of a sickening dread, as if staring into something inhuman. The most infamous case happened in the 1960s, when a family moved into the house next to the chapel and immediately noticed strange happenings, objects moving on their own, deep scratches appearing on doors, and the sound of heavy footsteps pacing the halls at night. But things quickly turned sinister. Their young daughter was dragged up the stairs by an invisible force, her ankles bruised as if gripped by huge hands. Another time, a priest was called to bless the house, only to be hurled across the room by something unseen, his holy water vial smashed against the wall. The family finally fled after witnessing the monk's full apparition, a hulking silhouette with glowing red eyes that charged at them before vanishing into the chapel walls. Even today, visitors to the chapel report being pushed, slapped, or choked by unseen hands. Some have heard guttural growls echoing from empty corners, while others have seen black shadows darting between the pews. Paranormal investigators who've tried to communicate with the entity say it responds with rage. EVP recordings capture snarling voices, and some have been physically attacked, their equipment malfunctioning or their bodies covered in unexplained scratches. The most chilling detail? Those who've survived an encounter claim the monk doesn't just haunt the chapel, he follows people home, bringing the terror with him. Whether he's a lost soul damned for his crimes or something far worse, the Black Monk of Pontifrack remains a warning. Some ghosts don't just want to be seen, they want to hurt you. 5. The Phantom Organist of St. Nicholas Chapel. The Phantom Organist of St. Nicholas Chapel on the Isle of Wight is one of England's most musical, and unsettling, ghosts. For over a century, visitors to the lonely seaside chapel have reported hearing the soft, mournful notes of a pipe organ drifting through the empty building late at night. The music is always the same, a slow, haunting melody that seems to rise from the very walls, though the chapel's organ has stood silent and broken for decades. Those brave enough to follow the sound claim it leads them to the shadowy figure of a man in old-fashioned clothing, his fingers gliding over the dusty keys of the abandoned instrument. But when approached, he vanishes, leaving behind only the faint scent of candle wax and the echo of his final, fading chord. Local legend says the organist was a devoted musician who played for every Sunday service until tragedy struck one stormy night in the 1800s. Some say he drowned trying to save a shipwrecked sailor, others whisper he died of a broken heart after his fiancée was lost at sea. Whatever the truth, his ghost refuses to leave his beloved chapel. Witnesses describe an overwhelming sadness clinging to the air when the music plays, as if the very building is mourning with him. One woman swore she saw the organist turn to look at her, his eyes hollow, his face gaunt, before he dissolved into the morning mist. Others have felt an icy hand brush against theirs when sitting in the pews, as if the ghost is seeking comfort in the company of the living. The most chilling encounter happened to a group of historians who stayed overnight to document the chapel's history. Around midnight, the organ suddenly roared to life, its pipes blaring a deafening, discordant tune, impossible, since the mechanism had long been rusted shut. As the researchers fled, one claimed to see the organist's silhouette standing at the chapel doors, his arms outstretched as if to block their escape. Since then, even skeptics admit there's something unnatural about St. Nicholas Chapel. Visitors still report hearing faint music on foggy nights, and some have captured ghostly figures in the organ loft on camera. Whether he's a lost soul longing for his final performance or a spirit trapped by unfinished business, the phantom organist plays on, a lonely spectre bound forever to the keys of his broken instrument. 6. The Headless Vicar of Clophill Old St. Mary's. The ruins of Clophill Old St. Mary's Chapel in Bedfordshire hold one of England's most gruesome ghost stories, the legend of the Headless Vicar. For over 200 years, locals have reported seeing the headless figure of a clergyman wandering the crumbling chapel grounds at midnight, his tattered robes rustling as he searches endlessly for something lost. The story dates back to the 1780s when a corrupt vicar was said to have performed black masses in the chapel, dabbling in dark arts that angered both the church and his parishioners. One stormy night, an angry mob dragged him from his home and beheaded him on the chapel steps, tossing his body into an unmarked grave but keeping his severed head as a warning. Since that night, his headless spirit has been seen pacing the ruins, his bony hands clutching at the empty space where his head should be. Those who've encountered the ghost tell of a sudden, sickening smell of rotting flesh right before he appears. Some have heard the phantom sound of a blade being sharpened just moments before seeing him. The most terrifying accounts come from people who ventured too close. They report feeling an invisible noose tighten around their necks, as if the vicar wants them to share his fate. One paranormal investigator claimed his camera captured something impossible, a floating head with milky dead eyes staring right at him, only for it to vanish when he looked up. Others have recorded disembodied moans near the old altar, where the vicar supposedly conducted his unholy rituals. The chapel's graveyard adds another layer of horror. Visitors often find fresh footprints in the mud leading to no one, and some have seen ghostly figures digging in spots where no graves exist. On the anniversary of the vicar's death, locals swear the chapel lights up with an eerie blue glow, and the sound of chanting in Latin echoes from its broken windows, though no one dares to investigate. Whether he's a sinner doomed to wander or something more demonic, the Headless Vicar remains one of England's most feared apparitions. His story serves as a dark reminder: some ghosts don't just haunt places. They haunt the very air, leaving behind the stench of death and the feeling that something headless is always watching from the shadows. 7. The Screaming Spirit of St. Catherine's Chapel. The ancient ruins of St. Catherine's Chapel in Dorset are home to one of England's most disturbing hauntings, the Screaming Spirit. For centuries, locals have reported hearing blood-curdling shrieks echoing across the hillside where the chapel stands, particularly on foggy nights when the moon hangs low. The screams are said to belong to a young woman named Catherine, who was walled up alive in the chapel's foundations as punishment for witchcraft in the 16th century. According to village records, she was accused of cursing the local lord's crops after refusing his advances, though many believed her innocent. As the last stones were placed over her face, she swore her spirit would never rest, and the chapel has been plagued by her tormented cries ever since. Those brave enough to approach the ruins after dark describe an unnatural silence that falls just before the screaming begins, a stillness so complete it feels like the world itself is holding its breath. Then comes the first shriek, so loud and sudden it sends birds exploding from nearby trees in panic. Witnesses say the sound seems to come from everywhere at once, rising from the very ground beneath their feet. Some have reported seeing a pale, emaciated face pressed against the chapel's remaining windows, mouth stretched wide in a silent scream before vanishing. Others tell of feeling ghostly hands clawing at their clothes as they run away, as if Catherine is desperately trying to drag someone down into her stone tomb. The most terrifying encounter happened to a group of archaeology students who camped near the ruins in 1998. Around midnight, their recording equipment picked up a woman whispering, "Help me," followed by a scream so powerful it made their ears bleed. When they played back the tape, they saw something impossible. Their thermal camera had captured the outline of a skeletal figure crawling out of the chapel wall before the footage cut to static. Since then, even daytime visitors report feeling watched from the empty windows, and some have photographed strange, hand-shaped marks appearing on the chapel's stones, as if someone buried alive is still trying to dig their way out. Whether Catherine was truly a witch or just an innocent woman wronged by history, her screams continue to pierce the Dorset night, a ghostly reminder that some horrors never stay buried. 8. The shadow figure of Newsham Park Chapel. The abandoned chapel at Newsham Park Hospital in Liverpool holds secrets so dark, even ghost hunters hesitate to enter after sunset. Built in the 1800s as an orphanage before becoming an asylum, the chapel's peeling walls seem to absorb all light, creating shadows that move when no one's there. The most frequently seen apparition is a shadow figure the staff called the Watcher, a tall, shapeless mass that stands perfectly still in the chapel's corner, its hollow gaze following visitors until they flee in terror. Former nurses reported hearing children's laughter echoing from the empty chapel at night, though no child had lived there since the 1950s. Some swore they saw small handprints appear on the dusty pews, only to vanish moments later. But the laughter always stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of someone, or something, gasping for air as if being strangled. The horror intensifies in the chapel's basement, where electroshock equipment still rusts in the darkness. Visitors describe being overcome with sudden nausea upon entering, their skin crawling with the sensation of invisible hands touching them. A psychic investigator once captured a voice whispering, "Don't make me go back," while his thermometer recorded the temperature dropping 20 degrees in seconds. The worst encounter happened to an urban explorer who became separated from his group. He later described being pushed to his knees by an unseen force while dozens of whispering voices surrounded him. When his friends found him, deep scratches ran down his back in perfect parallel lines, like the marks of surgical instruments. Former patients' diaries discovered in the asylum archives tell of a particularly cruel doctor who conducted unauthorized experiments in the chapel basement, believing he could cure mental illness through pain. Many of his subjects died screaming, strapped to the chapel's altar-like treatment tables. Now, visitors report hearing those same screams rebounding off the chapel's vaulted ceiling, sometimes accompanied by the phantom smell of burning flesh. The most disturbing reports come from security guards who patrol the abandoned complex. They claim to see shadowy figures kneeling in prayer in the chapel at 3 a.m., their heads snapping up in unison to reveal hollow, featureless faces if anyone interrupts them. Whether these are the trapped souls of abused patients or something more sinister, the chapel at Newsham Park remains a place where the air itself feels heavy with suffering, and where the line between prayer and pleading becomes horrifyingly thin. 9. The Ghostly Bride of St. Andrew's Chapel. The ghostly legend of St. Andrew's Chapel in Plymouth centers around a spectral bride whose tragic story still haunts the crumbling ruins. According to local lore, in the early 1800s, a young woman named Eleanor was set to marry her sweetheart in the chapel. Dressed in her wedding gown, she waited at the altar, but her groom never arrived. Later that night, his body was found floating in the nearby river, his pockets stuffed with rocks. Some say he took his own life, others whisper he was murdered by Eleanor's disapproving father. Whatever the truth, the devastated bride returned to the chapel that same evening and hanged herself from the rafters in her wedding dress. Since that night, visitors have reported seeing a pale woman in a tattered white gown drifting through the chapel ruins, her bare feet hovering inches above the ground, the ragged end of a noose still dangling from her broken neck. Those who encounter the ghostly bride describe an overwhelming sense of sorrow pressing down on their chests, making it hard to breathe. Some hear faint sobbing that seems to come from the walls themselves, while others report catching the faint scent of roses, the same flowers Eleanor carried on her doomed wedding day. The most chilling encounters happen at midnight, when witnesses claim to see the bride's ghost reenacting her final moments, standing at the altar, waiting for someone who will never come, before suddenly vanishing and reappearing beneath the rafters, her body jerking as if reliving her suicide. One photographer captured an eerie image of a blurred white figure standing near the chapel's broken stained glass window, her face a mask of despair. When he checked the spot moments later, the figure was gone, but the smell of roses lingered. Paranormal investigators have recorded sudden temperature drops in the exact spot where Eleanor's body was found, along with unexplained sobs and whispers on their audio devices. Some have even felt an icy hand grip theirs, as if the bride is desperately seeking comfort in death as she never found in life. The most terrifying account comes from a couple who visited the chapel at dusk. The woman swore something invisible yanked at her hair, pulling it into the shape of a bridal updo, while her fiancé watched in horror as a ghostly face appeared over her shoulder in the chapel's broken mirror, mouthing the words, "Till death do us part." Whether Eleanor's spirit is trapped by grief or something more sinister, one thing is certain: St. Andrew's Chapel remains a place where love and death intertwine, and where the ghostly bride forever waits for a wedding that will never be. 10. The Cursed Souls of St. Peter's Chapel. The ruins of St. Peter's Chapel in Kent are shrouded in whispers of a dark curse that has clung to its broken stones for centuries. Built on land where pagan rituals once took place, the chapel carries the weight of countless tragedies: sailors lost at sea, villagers struck by plague, and unexplained deaths that locals blame on the angry spirits trapped within its walls. The most disturbing reports speak of poltergeist activity so violent that even hardened investigators refuse to enter alone. Objects fly off the crumbling altar with terrifying force, deep scratches appear on visitors' skin as if made by invisible claws, and disembodied wails echo through the ruins at night, a chorus of suffering that seems to rise from the very earth. Legend says the curse began when a 12th-century priest conducted exorcisms in the chapel, only to become possessed himself. After he died screaming in the vestry, his final words were carved into the chapel wall: "The door is open." Now, those who spend too long near the ruins claim something follows them home. One of the most chilling encounters happened to a group of teenagers who dared each other to spend the night in the chapel. They later described hearing something large moving in the darkness, its breath ragged and wet, before an unseen force hurled stones at them from empty corners. One boy swore he saw a skeletal hand emerge from the chapel wall, its fingers twitching as if trying to grab him. When they fled, their photos revealed shadowy figures with hollow eyes watching from every window. Another visitor, a historian researching the chapel's past, found her notes filled with strange symbols she didn't remember writing, along with the repeated phrase, "Let us in," scrawled in a handwriting that wasn't hers. That night, she awoke to the sound of scratching at her bedroom door, back home, miles from the ruins, and found 3 long, muddy claw marks gouged into the wood. The curse seems strongest near the chapel's old well, where people report feeling an irresistible urge to jump, as if unseen hands are pulling them toward the edge. Others have captured ghostly voices on recording devices begging for help, only for the same voices to later whisper threats. The most terrifying detail: every few years, an animal, or sometimes a person, goes missing near the ruins, their belongings found neatly piled by the chapel door. Whether the curse stems from ancient pagan grounds, a possessed priest, or something far older, St. Peter's Chapel remains a place where the air hums with danger, and where the boundary between our world and something much darker feels terrifyingly thin. Visitors leave with one unanimous warning: some doors, once opened, can never be closed again.